Welcome back to the Logic Exchange. On this episode, we're talking about scaling volume and modernization in mass tort, what it takes to build, manage, and lead complex litigation at scale while maintaining the discipline, advocacy, and operational structure required to serve clients in high stakes cases. Joining us is Ann Andrews. She doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to try and do her justice. She is a nationally recognized attorney with more than 30 years of experience litigating personal injury and product liability cases involving dangerous drugs, medical devices, dietary supplements, and other complex claims. Her work also includes significant experience representing survivors in sexual assault cases involving minors, including matters tied to school districts and religious organizations. Anne has built a career taking on some of the largest and most difficult cases in the country, including matters involving major pharmaceutical companies, product liability defendants, and mass tort bankruptcies. She has secured major results for her clients, including large jury verdicts, and has played a leadership role in some of the most consequential mass tort bankruptcy proceedings in U.S. history. Her work includes involvement in the Boy Scouts of America bankruptcy, where negotiations resulted in $4.7 billion fund for survivors, as well as leadership roles in matters involving Purdue Pharma and the talc and powder ovarian cancer litigation connected to Johnson & Johnson and Red River. Across her career, Anne and her clients have served on more than 20 official tort claims committees appointed by the U.S. Trustee's Office to represent the interests of creditors and survivors. Beyond the courtroom, Anne has also made a lasting impact on legal education. Andrews and Higgins was one of the founding firms at the University of California, Irvine School of Law, where Anne helped support the school's development alongside founding Dean Erwin Cherminsky. She has served on advisory committees, judged moot court competitions, supported scholarships, and was awarded an honorary doctorate in recognition of her extraordinary contributions to the law school and the legal profession. Anne brings a rare perspective to this conversation, one that combines trial experience, mass tort leadership, bankruptcy expertise, client advocacy, and a deep understanding of how complex litigation must evolve to meet the demands of modern case volume. This is the Logic Exchange. I'm your host, Nick Thompson, the CRO with Email Agency and Law Logic, and this is Scaling Volume, Modernization and Mass Tort with special guest Ann Andrews. Welcome, Ann. Let's jump in.
Thanks for having me, Nick.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I feel like we could just end the podcast there and we're good, right?
Well, it's
Okay.
all accurate, but I'm sure you want to dive into some more detail.
Yeah, we'll get into a couple more things. So,
Well done, by the way.
thanks, thank you. So, want to start with your story, your career path, and trailblazing leadership. And you've built a remarkable career over more than 30 years, taking on some of the largest companies, most difficult cases, and most complex legal environments in the country. Before we get into the mechanics of mass tort and modernization, I'd love to start with your story. What first drew you into plaintiff side work and specifically complex personal injury, product liability, and mass tort?
Well, I've been asked this to tell this story before, and every time I kind of tell it a little differently, but it gets more unique and more curious, and I think more entertaining for your viewers. So it's not the traditional path. It's not a story you've heard a million times about somebody's uncle graduated from Harvard and brought him into a company. How did I become a lawyer and why?
Mm-hmm.
So I had a very large Irish Catholic family, and there were six brothers,
Okay.
and they were always in trouble, constantly being
Mm-hmm.
chased around by the local law enforcement in a neighborhood in where I was born in Fullerton, California, where they were the boys that they had a lot of shenanigans and they were often being followed by the law.
They sound fun.
Well, yes, except that, things would happen and
Mm-hmm.
the first person in the family they would run to was me to get them out of whatever scrape they were in, rescue them. So I had one particularly very unique brother who was quite the larger than life partier in high school. Even by most people's standards, he was a top football player, got away with murder because he wanted, everything his way.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially the reason I started practicing how I knew at an early age. So figure I'm about 19. I think I'm a freshman in college. Um, it all started out with a gunshot.
Oh, okay.
My brother pounding on my door in the front of the house at 2 a.m. was bleeding and covered in blood. He was yelling at me. This is a guy who was a cool character. His name was George. He was known throughout the county for his shenanigans and antics. Had been shot. I examined it, and it looked as though, from what I could see in his hysteria, that it was more of a flesh wound in his arm. And the story that he told me was that he and Dale, his best friend, went over to a certain young lady's house, being invited there after a football game,
Mhm.
which was not uncommon. This young lady was quite popular with the football players, and let's just say we all knew that she had a little after party going on, and that certain boys that were invited were welcome. We don't need to go any more of that
It's
detail.
fair enough.
Except
Yeah.
that he and the quarterback, Dale, walked down, imagine a large California ranch home. He was invited to come to the back door, a slider toward a recreation room where her bedroom suite was, and so we'll call it the TV room, down the side of the house. And Dale was leading the way down the path, the side of the house. They opened the sliding door, which I think she had left open for them on other occasions, and they were greeted by a curtain being pulled back and a gunshot. The
Mm.
shot went through, the gun that discharged went through Dale, who was standing in front of my brother, exited Dale, and went through my brother's arm. Not a serious flesh wound, but a bleeding. He was covered in blood.
Yep.
So, in his state of hysteria, Dale's been shot. Dale's been shot. We got to go find Dale. I got in the car. I think I was in my nightgown, literally, like, the old robe and nightgown and slipper days. And we drove to the local hospital where, it was maybe 10-minute drive, because that's where Dale, the ambulance, took him. And he had a very serious, serious wound. It had gone through him, ruptured his spleen, and exited, missing his spinal column. Dale was accepted to USC and was on with a scholarship and being targeted to be a quarterback
Wow.
in the next year. Big career ahead of him. If you know anything about USC, particularly
Hmm.
back in those years, all these local kids were scouted heavily for talent. We had a lot of it in Orange County, and Orange County was, highly populated with all kinds of people from that went to SC from here. So I go to the hospital, and immediately I see a whole bunch of suits and uniforms. And it's obviously something much bigger than just a guy who shot some kids by mistake entering the house where they were invited. And the lawyers watching will know what invitee means. I went in to see Dale's parents, who were in a state of hysteria. And my brother on the way had told me what had happened. I already pretty much knew. So I went in and talked to his parents and said, the boys did nothing wrong. They're saying they're going to put him in jail. They're going to accuse him of breaking and entering with an intent to commit a sexual crime. We're in trouble. He'll lose his scholarship. So I'm calming these parents down and saying, that is not what happened. Don't talk to these people. I'm calling the family lawyer. So I pretended to call. We did have a family lawyer, but it's 2 a.m. and I'm, serial dialing. I said, don't you talk to them. I'm calling. A lawyer will be here shortly. And I'm yelling at all these suits. Don't talk to these people. And don't you dare talk to my brother. So I threw him in an examination room and said, you don't come out of there. Because I saw immediately what was going on. And they were all from Los Angeles. Big LA sheriff badges and so forth. It wasn't like our local little gendarmes who we all kind of knew, who were
Hmm.
always tracking my brothers for some sort of shenanigans. This was big brass. So I demanded to know who they were. It became immediately clear that they were there, and they presented the family with a release of all liability because the man that shot them was a reserve Los Angeles Sheriff Department officer.
Oh, wow.
And it was a Los Angeles Sheriff Department issued weapon. I don't know how I knew all this at such a young age, but I knew it was wrong. And I knew that they were railroading this poor family who didn't
Hmm.
know if their son was going to survive, who was in surgery, and accusing their son, who was a nice kid with a big career ahead of him. My brother was more of kind of the wild boy. Dale was a good kid, and they were going to destroy this kid's career, threaten it. And unfortunately, I couldn't stop them. They signed it, and
Mm.
they signed it, and there was a plea entered of that they wouldn't prosecute, rather a plea not entered, but the promise was they wouldn't prosecute the crimes if he signed the civil waiver. Like, needless to say, they never asked my brother for one, right? Because I was like the mama bear screaming at all of them, don't you talk to these boys, you have no right. I had no idea about Miranda or any other. I was just acting with the instincts of a teenager. I was so angry that the poor kid's parents signed that waiver. Fortunately, I was so angry at the lies and the way in which the police treated this family that were so desperate, not giving them a chance to call an attorney, not giving them a chance to have a second opinion. And it sort of served me well as I went through college and law school, eventually thinking about those people. If I had been a lawyer, I could have helped them, and
Hmm.
their son's career wouldn't have been threatened. It just would have had a different outcome, right? I think we could all agree. So that is what kind of started my anger, in the flame in me that always burned when I saw justice being denied to people. And my brother and I talked about it many times, about what an awful night that was. Everybody came out of it okay. My brother had a flesh wound, he had some stitches, but we never forgot that night and what the police did and what all the suits that were lawyers deployed immediately. It was within an hour and a half of the shooting, they were all there getting this family to sign. So that's what kind of set me on the path for justice. We were in the middle of the women's movement, and I thought, and did have some good advice along the way, that being an attorney, no matter what, was a ticket for your future that could make you unstoppable. It gave you the kind of credentials that no matter what, no matter whether you were welcomed or not welcomed, which we'll probably talk about,
Hmm.
you were a member of a club, an elite club of status. And so, not knowing what the heck I was going to do with a law degree, not knowing what the heck I was going to do with a law career, it became pretty obvious to me that that was a club that I wanted to belong to. And I met a lot of interesting family friends and members of the legal community along the way. It was a much smaller county then, so family knew a lot of the prominent lawyers. And I just I was kind of sponsored by them. I was
That
welcomed.
that's awesome. I love that. I'd actually never heard that story. That's amazing. Had you considered law school prior to that, or what were you going to school for at that point, or were you already going to be pursuing law?
So be interesting. So I was a liberal arts major in a small but very prestigious women's college in the Midwest, where I was actually pursuing a major in music. I was an
Okay.
opera singer.
That's awesome. Okay.
And but I also had a great, deep, passionate love for history. And I was also, I grew up during the Nixon impeachment trial, and I was pretty sure, despite the very conservative leanings of my family, as everybody in this county was, until Clinton changed the color of the county from red to blue for the first time, the presidential election. I was very aware of the differences between the politics of this county and very, very conservative interests versus movements that were going on around the country, and civil rights, voting rights, all the cases that we think of now as the important game changers of our my generation. I had a very keen eye on politics as well. So history, literature. I was basically getting a very, very serious classical education. And I mean classical meaning great books,
Mhm.
all the history. It was a very general education. I had a great thirst for knowledge. So but my music career, which was really supported at this college with a conservatory approach, was also great fun. But let's just say the competitiveness, the resources it took and does take to be in that kind of league, and in the performance of classical music, was something that wasn't going to be available for me as it was for other young women who had a great deal more resources than I did. But
I
I loved it,
gotcha.
and still do to today.
That's amazing. I love that. I love that. My wife and I enjoy going to the theater, and it's been one that my wife's a singer as well, and so it's always super impressive to me when you see somebody at like the height of their of their talent, right? And just laying it all out there, bearing their soul. And to a certain degree, I think that that happens in a courtroom as well. And so we kind of covered the why, right? Like this is why I knew I wanted to do this line of work. But let's jump more into some of the trailblazing work that you've done, because let's face it, you're a force. And so you've been a trailblazer for so many successful female attorneys in a space that's historically been male dominated. What was it like building your career and your reputation in that environment?
So, some things about yourself,
Mhm.
and um, it was pretty obvious to me. My father was a high-powered executive and a very highly trained engineer, savant, textbook writer, super scientist, could never stand in his shadow, though the family had a big engineering firm. Um, that wasn't going to be my path. Though, interestingly enough, I did step in and run it for a couple of years when he was sick. So I actually ran a large engineering firm, which was
Amazing.
kind of fun. Charge of 80 men. You know, I knew that I had an entrepreneurial gene from my dad, and I knew that I wasn't going to be really a good fit to work in a male-dominated office, particularly the traditional law office. So from the time I started the practice of law, though I started small and humble, that's kind of an interesting story. Uh, I learned pretty quick that I just didn't want to be a garden variety personal injury lawyer. Though I tried a lot of cases, I had a lot of very interesting cases. It was an extremely competitive market in a small county at the time, and it was dominated by all the great lawyers that you've heard of. And no, Mark Robinson was sort of king of Orange County with the Pinto verdict, and we had some other great lawyers here, and some of my mentors that were close to my family were very helpful throughout my career, but it was men. And I came into the law at a time where women didn't even have children. It was like we were considered it was considered to be inappropriate for a professional woman to have children because we weren't going to raise our children properly. Women shouldn't work. That was this county, probably 20, 30 years behind the times. There was a lot of prejudice. So I started my own firm. I started humbly. I had some big success early, but I got pretty bored with it. Right. So I was watching the news about what was happening in mass tort, and I was watching some great lawyers do things like the L-tryptophan cases, which is kind of
Mhm.
considered, maybe the early founding mass tort. And then we had a little thing called the breast implant litigation. And as a woman in business, and advocating for, for health issues for women, because I'd handled some Dalcon Shield cases, though it was very unusual. That was another kind of bankruptcy setting. I was very interested in products and women's health issues. And so the breast implant litigation came forward. And I also knew that resources were very important. Obviously, at that time, funding cases, learning how to get capital. I think I probably was the first woman that Wells Fargo ever offered a line of credit to
That's
in
amazing.
Orange County. And it was a whole whopping $200,000. I thought, boy, I've really arrived. So I partnered with other firms. I found people who were successful and wanted to work with me, and that's also how I was taught. So some of the greats around me, I brought them the cases and they brought me the knowledge and pushed me into the spotlight to show me how to become what I yearned for. And I had some great times as a young lawyer with some beloved members of the bar here that I grew very close to and helped me through some difficult times too. Not if things are not always easy, and you need people in your
Mhm.
life that you can confide in and go to for mentorship and advice. We call them Dutch uncles, right? The people who
Mhm.
always tell you need people in your life that will always tell you what no one else would, and they'll tell you the truth when no one else will, right? What
Yep.
what 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 you don't want to hear, but you need to know. That's a Dutch uncle. So I had several of those people to help guide me because I was learning how to be a businesswoman as well. And advertising was kind of, was old school, but I amassed a very large group of breast implant clients across a broad spectrum of the manufacturers. I studied that. I also really love the science that came with law. One of the things I've loved about
Hmm.
law, kind of like the way I did my education, is you can pick an area that you need to become an expert in. And so learning immunology and rheumatology and engineering of products and the dangers of silicone was a massive research project for me of great interest. So I kind of beat a lot of people, and maybe that's true today, as unfortunate as it might be. People jump into cases that they may not have as much knowledge about. I will often
Hmm.
spend a year or two in a deep study with all these fine lawyers and researchers here, bringing me the knowledge I need to make a decision. We're not a law firm that just kind of follows the herd. Like, I know we do have kind of a herd mentality. If you go to a conference and everyone's jumping over here, that's where everyone runs, and they're good
Yep.
lawyers, so that's where I'm gonna run. No, I'm more of an innovator. I think my biggest successes have been where I have innovated and originated the project and started it. And then others have followed us. And that's true even today. But it was early goings were tough. But then I got such a reputation through my own advertising, and I would send out brochures and mailers to other law firms saying, "Hey, I'm doing this business, and you have these clients, and you should collaborate with me." So I did kind of interesting pieces about who I was, targeted marketing, and then rather soon I was offered a joint venture position, a very lucrative one that was very successful with a firm who hadn't really done mass tort before, but was all in on it. Tried a lot of those cases, enjoyed a lot of success. And, my reputation has sort of expanded. And I think people that know me know that, shrinking violet's not usually put in a sentence with me. I've always had this personality. I think one of the things that I enjoy about being a woman that has her own firm is I don't have to go and ask anyone for permission.
Right.
I
Yep.
get to make my decisions. And I recognize the structure of other law firms, where we'll try to gather minds to make decisions and move cases in a certain way, particularly in the committee structure. And everybody's like holding back when it's very clear we should be pleading this and discovering that. But I know they have to go back and talk to 5 people in their firm, right? Well, I blast ahead of people because I'm the decision maker. I collaborate with the people here who I've trained, and everyone in this law firm is a great deal younger than I am. So the next generation, some of who we're a great collective consciousness of what the firm's going to do. But I speak my mind because I don't have to check with anyone. So I think when I'm invited to speak or I'm invited to a podcast, people know it's not going to be, it's not going to be the daily news. I'm going to give you spicy answers, and I'm going to tell you what I think because that's how I've always been. And the
Yep.
freedom, a lot of people tell you about the success in life and the happiness in life is your ability to be self-determinant, right? I get to decide. Nobody puts on my desk from a senior partner here, you're going to go on this case and you're going to do this, and you take all these depositions, and nobody's doing that to me. I've made this decision. This is your career path. This is your case. This is your subject. I've always been like that. I've always decided what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it. And I think it's kept me, even in this decade of my career, so unbelievably energized and charged. I am not bored with this practice. In some ways, I feel like I'm just getting started. So go
I love
figure.
that. I love that. I mean, and you and I were introduced by Michael Watts, a good friend of both of ours. And one of the things that I've been just drawn to with you is how fierce you are. I like that. No, there's no bullshit. You get what it is, and I love that. Did that come from any of the mentors or role models in your career, or any like defining experience, or is that just an Ann Andrews original?
I think it comes from growing up with a bunch of Irish brawling brothers. That you got to hold your own.
Yeah.
There's a platter of food in the middle of the table, and you better get your fork out there. I mean, it was a funny way to grow up. It was,
Are you the
very
only
male.
sister? Are you the only
I had
sister?
one sister, but she was quite a bit younger. And so in an Irish
Okay.
family, the oldest sister, do you know we have a name with and all the Irish women on this in this listening in will know. So the title given to the oldest daughter in a big Irish family is the Irish maid.
Okay.
So
Okay. No,
the
I had never heard that.
inequalities, yes, we are supposed to be in the kitchen. We're
Ah,
supposed to be in the tradition with our grandmothers. Um, the brothers are off watching TV and drinking beer when, they should be doing anything but, and I'm in the kitchen, you know, cleaning up after 9 people every night, 10 people every night. That did not go over really well.
mhm.
So when you ask me about fierceness, I just think that I was given permission also and encouraged from a young age to speak my mind. Um, my dad was an extremely busy, extremely successful, when he passed, holder of 15 or 16 patents, many of them still in force today for businesses that they gave all my brothers, by the way. But he was a bombastic type. He would enter a room, and then once I became a lawyer, the funny thing is when you're the only lawyer in a family with a father like mine, all of a sudden you become the family lawyer.
Yep.
So all of a sudden my voice became really important in some very important boardrooms around this town that where he was making deals. And I was all of a sudden in the middle of, family trusts and transactional work. And that's how I came to run his engineering company for a couple of years, um, and enjoyed it. And really enjoyed the experience of negotiating those contracts and doing things in public works and so forth. But without him pushing me, it just became kind of like, okay, Dad, well, here we go in. And he would speak his mind and I'd back him up with the terms and the legal principles involved, whatever it was. And I think the place where it shows up the most, and I know you're going to get there, but maybe we'll get there a little earlier, is this whole business of mass tort bankruptcy.
Yep.
I fear in some ways that I have been painted with the brush of being an advocate for it. And I know that there's a deep divide in our bar about people who are so against it and those that know there is an acceptance of it we have to have. And it always depends on where the case is at the time there's a filing. But, the whole bankruptcy business and some of the people who very well learned this in the 90s when the first series of big mass tort bankruptcies started, which grew out of product liability companies that made dangerous dietary supplements.
Yep.
6 of them filed for bankruptcy within 2 years, the ephedra companies, and we were already in an MDL in New York of
Was
a
that
group,
Yaz? That was Yaz, right?
ephedra.
Ephedra. Okay. Okay.
Ephedra. So dietary supplements, not
Yeah.
not regulated by the FDA.
Okay.
All different law. You don't deal with you don't deal with all the preemption and warning issues. It's a supplement. So
Yeah.
learning that law, right? Very interesting, whole field, very different than pharma. And we still continue in that business today. There's still some very dangerous dietary supplements out there. Um, and the first series of those bankruptcies that were filed, I thought I was going to lose my mind. Dow Corning filed a bankruptcy, which really started it, but that was like a fake thing because it was Dow and Corning who had formed a joint venture to make these horrible products. They weren't really insolvent, but they were allowed in Midland, Michigan to file a case and to keep a case in bankruptcy court. Now, I wasn't on the front line of that case, but I certainly was watching it. Was a little too young to be rolling around in that courthouse telling people what to do, but that case should have been dismissed. There was no insolvency, but it didn't. So that was my first introduction. So then in the later 90s, these very wealthy dietary supplement companies facing the massive liabilities as we filed suits. I had probably 150 suits filed in states across the country. And when they filed, oh my God, I was like in awe. So I tell people, you better learn how to play the rules of bankruptcy because you all think everybody in the mass tort business thinks they could in their mind, they know the rules of football and they know the rules of, how to win a football game. And they probably even perceive themselves as being champion football players in their legal sense. But the field just got moved from football to soccer. And very few of those men that played great games of football, take any competitive sport where they were playing in a high elite, or that they've studied, those rules don't apply. And one of the problems that lawyers have is to stop applying the rules of football to the soccer rules. You're on a different court.
Mhm.
You're in
I love
internet.
that.
You're in a
Yeah.
different community, country, courthouse, and everybody on that field knows what they're doing but you. And you got to resist the temptation to think that you can use all of your skills as a trial lawyer and push them in a bankruptcy court. Judges know very well, very quickly, who's playing the right game and who isn't. And I will say that was a challenge for a lot of our colleagues. And in some of the cases that got a lot of notoriety, it was dangerous, and it continued to be dangerous for the various ways that people file bankruptcies. But there comes a time when you don't have a choice, right? So back to my fierceness, when you're negotiating in bankruptcy, you're negotiating for your group of creditors for which you have been asked to represent through your client a seat on a creditors committee. And it's political. It has legal issues, it has financial issues, it has this whole soccer field of rules that you better play by their rules and understand how the game's played. And you better sharpen up on those rules. And with the World Cup going on, it seems kind
Hmm.
of pertinently relevant, but very few Americans that are elite athletes were going to walk into a World Cup field and win a game. It's like, that's how different it is. So
Yep.
trial lawyers becoming the second team, if you will, to the bankruptcy lawyers, hiring the best, knowing who to hire to represent a committee, knowing what experts to hire, knowing how to come onto that field, and then negotiating fiercely is something I developed a skill for very early. I've also tried cases in bankruptcy. I've put on entire Daubert trials in bankruptcy over the scientific challenges of the drug, which, it's pretty scary in the early years. And then I got very successful at it. All of them successfully concluded. Even the Metabolite case in the Ninth Circuit was concluded with a big result for the tort victims, because the standard from circuit to circuit is very different. The Ninth Circuit requires almost unanimity of the voting. When the creditors vote, you can have a certain percentage vote against the plan, and still the majority or the super majority will carry the day. But in the Ninth Circuit, you got to have unanimous approval by
Wow.
creditors. So there were some very very difficult moments in court where I had to throw the court off some people who were voting against, and what their real intention was. So we had a tricky but successful case in the early 2000s in Metabolife out here in California. So you got to be good on your feet. You got to be a fierce negotiator, because you're competing with other creditor groups for your
Yep.
claims. So, and when the claims are basically the case, how strong are they? How much are they worth? How solid are they? So though I'm often painted with the brush because I talk about it so much as being a mass tort lawyer in bankruptcy, I don't wish for bankruptcy. I just know when it's coming. And the
Right.
PG&E, when the fire victims got caught in bankruptcy and PG&E, which is where I met Michael and so many other people, they were completely out of their league. They had, and they won't like me saying it, but they were playing football, and it was pissing a lot of people off. So we did successfully end that case, though it was pretty wild. Because what I've learned about lawyers is that they don't accept change all that easily. And they certainly don't accept it from me telling them, someone like me telling them that they're, well, let's just call it what it is, that they're wrong and they're losing the game. But, I've always been that person. And I think maybe the reputation of knowing that when you speak to me, I will tell you the truth and I will tell you why. And I'll help you get to the right answer, was certainly something that I've become known for. And the U.S. Trustee's Office, though, I'm not as sure of it as every time we go into a committee meeting, a committee hearing, or an application process. But let's just say I'm rarely turned down for a committee position, because once you get known for your leadership, the goal of bankruptcy is to get to a deal, right? If you
Absolutely.
want to dismiss the
Absolutely.
case, you want to dismiss the case, and certainly cases needed to be dismissed in the Third Circuit and some of the mass tort litigation. But, talc has been a real struggle. And I think
For a long time. This has been a very long process for
it has
talc.
been the most tortured, difficult case with some of the most aggressive and tough negotiators on both sides, mistakes made on both sides. And what I always wind up these sort of interviews, wherever I am, being asked these types of questions is, at the end of the day, the thing about bankruptcy is it's a democratic process. You have one creditor, one claim, one vote. And that means a lot in this world. And when the creditors vote for a plan after all of the requirements of bankruptcy, and we have an incredible system in the United States. I've been in bankruptcies in foreign courts, very different. But when creditors get to speak with their vote, like any other process, they're going to elect a plan. And that is meaningful to me. And we do a lot of work in polling our clients constantly about what they want. And those are the things that guide me, right? That the clients, it's the client's decision, and what they want is what I have to want. And then representing their interests. And Bloomberg just did an article on, it was published on Monday about, the second negotiation of Purdue. It was pretty dramatic. Our creditor group resolved its claims. We did better. I often tell people the bankruptcy case, when the deal falls apart, which it certainly did when the Supreme Court ruled that our releases weren't legal, a lot of forlorn and upset people. I said, listen, bankruptcy is the place where deals fall apart, and they often come back together better. And that's the case that did.
Absolutely. I mean, it sounds like there's been so many lessons learned along the way with this, and you're a master of the craft. And we've transitioned obviously into the bankruptcy side of things, which I think it's a story that needs to be told. And I do want to get back to some more of your stories as we continue through, but. When you're looking at all of these things, right? And you've seen firms come and go. You've seen leadership change as new blood comes in and folks retire, et cetera, right? How has the mass tort leadership changed over the course of your career, and where do you see that going in the future?
So over the course of my career, the first MDL that was seated in the Dow Corning litigation, the breast implant litigation, it was the Dow Corning case in Alabama. Judge Sam Pointer is no longer with us, but he seated a committee of, I would say, all men, but maybe one. And I think it was a 12-person committee for leadership, executives, co-leads, PSC. And I remember a prominent lawyer named Gail Troutwine. She now lives in Columbia, Missouri, and has a practice there. She didn't put up with it. When you talk about where I got my inspiration from, Gail Troutwine put a letter on the docket and demanded a hearing in front of the judge for her application to be considered. Highly qualified, had tried cases, came from a powerful, very successful, smart firm, Williams Troutwine in Portland. And I saw her push her way past a blockade, a slate. And I saw a judge grant her a seat on the committee against every big player in mass tort that would do anything to keep her from it. And to this day, I'll never forget how Gail said, "Don't be afraid." It told me to not be afraid. So that's where it started. And, but look, it's still a struggle. What I will say is that in my time in my career, what I love, and we just had a Roblox committee meeting the other day where I'll call it the young, dynamic, great women of the Roblox litigation, which is a horrible case, as you know, and our firm can take credit for inventing that. We filed the first case in San Diego. I really mentored my young partner, Rob Psycho, to really lead that. I'm trying to say, my plate's very full and has been for a long time, but bringing my younger partners in because they're so smart. So Rob's in leadership in both the MDL and the JCCP, where we're waiting for an assignment.
Yep.
And so we had a great meeting the other day, and it was fun because all the women sat. It was like we had a nice dinner. It was like great. It was like junior high. All the women sat at a table, and all the guys sat at a table, and we just had the most like wonderful exchange and great conversation. And this is the new generation. Uh, Rachel Lanier is going to have a
Hmm.
big role in that case, of course, her dad, but Rachel is something else, let me tell you.
Hmm.
And I could go through the whole list of women in Roblox, and we're sort of, I can just see their energy and their power. And it's fun for me because they have so many questions for me, and I have so much to say to them. And I think it's going to be a very important case.
Yep,
Uh,
I agree. It's near and dear to our heart, as you know, and
yes.
we can talk about that a little bit more as we go through this. But I love hearing stories like this because oftentimes, being in the seat that I sit in, um, it's almost like a movie unfolding, right? But I don't get to see the behind the scenes side of it. So you're giving me that side of it, which is an amazing perspective.
But what my goal is, or what my hope is for the goals for this next generation, I think women still struggle. And I know you're talking about this law school, but what I hear all the time is, how am I going to have a family and be a successful lawyer? How did you do it, Anne? And I always tell women in a law school class, when I'm asked in a, women's caucus meeting or at one of our gatherings, and there's some great groups that have been started that we're all gathering together around sort of leadership and women who have common interests. Um, is, look, girls, if you stop having kids, what does that say for the next generation? If all the smartest women in the world stop having kids, you must have children. And we've got to push your way through
Mhm.
to procreate, to have the great next minds come up, girls and boys. Because honestly, it's not untrue that still today, women entering law school are like, I don't know if I can have a family. And that remains to be, a big topic. So when I see women managing family, children, law, all the things they need to do in this new crop of women, and also dads, it's like the dad time is now shown up. Rob just started his leave yesterday. He's expecting a baby next week.
That's
Um,
amazing.
we transitioned all of his cases, and I raised my daughter at work, and I profess to be and live by the fact that this is a family run business, run by lawyers who love and need their families as much as they need the
That's
law.
That's amazing. I love that. And if you could talk to Rob's wife and if she could have that baby on Monday, we'd share a birthday. So that would be
Oh,
pretty fun.
well,
That
you
would be
might get
pretty
your
fun.
wish. I think it's right around the corner.
That's
That would be
amazing.
great.
That's amazing.
But the point I wanted to make, though, is that though I see women, and I could give you examples of cases that are going great, I'm so impressed. And I'm not even in a major role, so I really get to watch it, because I can't be everywhere. Purdue took 7.5 years out of my life, and it was pretty much nearly a full-time job and almost 50% of my time all the time.
Wow.
Um, so, but others, that have come forward in MDLs, and some of the all mostly women-led MDLs are really the fun ones, the really fun women to hang around with and see their grasp and their savvy and how they learned it and what they do. But here's what really bothers me. What I see women still struggling with, and I won't give any specifics. I see women at all levels of the mass tort and personal injury mass tort bar struggling to get equity. I really
Mm,
don't think that women are rewarded enough for the contribution they're making in the roles of ownership. And I think it's gotten better, but I don't think it's where it should be. And what I tell women who come to me when they're negotiating or when they're in the midst of making decisions about a career move, I said, look, I think these are the non-negotiables, and if they don't meet those terms with your talent and what you've done, you should be prepared to leave. And that's hard.
hmm.
Women are, I see women being much more aggressive with their business dealings in the defense bar in corporate America, which I find very interesting.
Why do you think that is?
Well, the women that I know that have done it successfully, usually have a terrific power base of the client relationship
Hmm.
and a huge success in the courts and very, very high profile cases. And I'm not going to say the names, but people will know who I'm talking about. And since they came up at a firm that didn't probably recognize them and their potential, and it is harder to break into the traditional profit centers of a traditional white shoe law firm, they're leaving and they're taking whole departments with them. And the big firm grabbing, like a team, right? It's like they're grabbing the quarterback or the center, the most successful team player is going to go play for another team. And I've seen some women make some pretty bold moves in my career and get what they want and leave if they don't get it. And those women are known, they've written about it, the ones that are a certain age, everybody knows. They just said, I'm leaving, I'm taking the clients with me, the clients follow them. And then I've seen big law firms set up whole offices in cities where they didn't have an office just for that talent. And
That's power. That's power right
it
there. And that's
is, it
impressive.
is, it is, it is. And I think, you know, but I don't know those women well enough to the sacrifices they made. So
Okay.
I can't comment. But what constantly women are at odds with is, how am I going to do this with the family? So we talk, and when we're hiring, and we just brought on several lawyers because who thought at this age I'd be expanding my law firm, and I am. It's getting bigger. Uh, the deep conversations I have with really qualified candidates who have children, and then I say, listen, don't take my word for it. Go talk to so and so that I hired and ask her.
Sure. Yeah.
You guys go have a cocktail, have a glass of wine on me, and ask her, and she'll tell you the truth. Does she really live up to her promises? Is this really true? You have to ask somebody who works for me. So, but that those things still do worry. It's our DNA is guilty if we're not there for every thing that you need to be there as a mom. And it's it's it it's getting easier, and women are getting more comfortable with it, but there's a challenge. Your kids are critical of you. You're not there. You couldn't,
Hmm.
whatever the criticisms are of all parents, we all get them no
Yeah.
matter what. Nobody gets out of parenting alive, right? We all
Right.
have some criticisms. I always tell them, I said, well, my child complains and no, 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 no. I said, listen, they all do it. But
Hmm.
you live for the day when they're in their young 20s, like with my daughter, when she finally called me, when she had set up her own household, was newly married, had a dog, had a job, had a husband. She said, Mom, I don't know how you did it. You were always there for me. Every rehearsal, every
Hmm.
show. And I said, Liz, I had to wait 22 years for you to tell me that. It was worth it. Like,
Yep.
because
As
I
a,
was the unicorn. I was in school and in the community theater where she was going, in the dance classes. She was a theater kid, which was great fun to raise a theater kid. I would have raised. She said, "Mom, isn't it so much fun to have a kid who's in the theater than you having to sit on a soccer field or baseball?" I said, "I would have been a good mom at either any of those things, Liz." So but you have to find joy, and you have to find common things for your children. Too many parents, I'm getting off topic, but we all have seen the parents, the ragers at the games, because
hmm
they want their child to be what they want them to be. So much of parenting is learning to listen to what your child wants to be and fostering that in the child, even if it doesn't match your goals. They're not going to be an athlete, or they're not going to be a super STEM kid or whatever. And identifying with your child is a challenge for a lot of people, because
Yeah.
you're creating another life that you want to be more like you. Well, guess what? That doesn't turn out.
You're
And when it
you're you
doesn't,
are absolutely right on that one. Not about me at all, but I have four kids,
oh
and
wow.
four boys, and each one of them couldn't be any more different than the other. And I think the biggest lesson that I learned at an early age, is balancing all of these things, or at least trying to. And to your point, I screwed up all the time, all the time. It's funny. I'm gonna be 45 on Monday, and it's the oldest I've ever been, right? And I've never had to do any of these things, and so when having kids in and now in college, and I'm a grandfather. I have two grandkids, and but still also
Wow.
having a 12-year-old, right? It's balancing all of these things and showing up. You said that to me earlier. You said something about it. That's half the battle. Just being there, showing them that it's important, and taking an active just an active approach into what they're into, I think is half the battle sometimes. And so I applaud you for that. I can't imagine starting and running a law firm and balancing a theater kid as well as all of the different things, driver's licenses, and all of these things. So
How about just
hats
getting to
off to you.
school on time when you have
Sure.
court downtown?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh
I
no, you
can.
can't
I
drop your kid off before 7:15. Well, sorry, I gotta get back to
Yeah.
LA,
You
but
guess what's going to happen.
something's
So
gonna happen, right? Someone's
yeah,
gonna be mad at
amazing.
you all the time. But look,
Amazing.
I think that leadership is changing. I
Hmm.
want it to change more. And if there's fierceness, I could, bottle it and inject in other people's veins about how to be fierce negotiators for their interests and their value. And then I would do it. But the second part is too that women shouldn't be afraid to do what I've done. Why am I the unicorn? Why are there so few of
Hmm.
me? Right? It is scary. But once
Hmm.
there should be a course. I don't know, maybe I'll teach it. Maybe there
There
should
you
be
go.
a, maybe there should we have tax degrees at law schools. Maybe there should be a degree in law business. But it's scary because, family and responsibilities of litigation, high pressure, and then also becoming a businesswoman and learning how to build a business um is an acquired skill. But when you learn it, there's nothing more fun than really, like I said, being the master of your own destiny and deciding. I don't think there's a higher enjoyment over career fulfillment and personal fulfillment than being the one who decides what you're going to do. Success or failure. Not everything I do is a success. Not everything any of us do is a success.
Right.
But it was a success because I decided when it was going to stop, or I made a calculated decision. Nobody made it for me. And I consulted and did all the research. Well, it didn't turn out. We don't need to name any specific mass torts, but we don't play in all of them. We look at a lot of different factors as a firm and say, no, one's a little too scary for reasons that we might know as a result of the news from the Supreme Court this week.
Yes. Yeah. Unfortunately, absolutely. So we've gone through some of the bankruptcy stuff, and I just want to make sure that I'm being respectful of your time. Want to get into some of the sex abuse litigation here in a second, but I have one
Sure.
last question on the bankruptcy side of things and just leadership in general, right? What separates firms that are truly prepared for complex mass tort leadership from firms that are simply chasing volume?
Resources,
Okay.
innovation, uh, team building and team playing. You are part of a team when you're on a committee, and
Hmm.
pretty soon whether or not there's a team to be played on, or it's really being run by people who not really interested in input. Um, I think fairness, in all things, being fair to the contribution of all people. I tend to be a person of generous spirit and recognize the worth of all contributions. And I'm not so sure that happens all the time in leadership. So if you're very frank with leadership about what your contribution is, and you show up for it. We don't want people on committees just marking time for sitting on calls, or you know I think the good people in our business, when you find them, you stick with them. And that's why you kind of see sort of a hive of people move from case to case, because the qualities that they share,
Hmm.
we share together, are ones that we've learned to trust and advance. And I do think there are camps in our bar, and I think that sometimes, you're not going to be invited into that camp, no matter what you
Yeah.
do. So it's politics, just like anything else. I mean, it's power
Yeah.
in politics. So you just have to be aware it's not always going to be fair, and build fairness with your reputation, and people will be attracted to it.
Yep. I agree with you on everything that you just said. I've been doing this for I don't know, 16 years, I guess, at this point. And some of my best friends in this space are technically my competitors. But it started with, oh, saw him at a conference. Oh, saw him at another conference. Oh, hey, I'm Nick. And we just kind of go through that, and it turns into a friendship, and one where we bounce ideas off of each other, because at the end of the day, you and I are chasing the same thing. We're just coming at it from different angles, right? We're coming at it from the, we
Well,
want
you're
to get
definitely
you
going
what
to
you.
end up in the same
Mhm.
place,
Yeah, yep,
right? You're definitely going to end up in the same place. Some law firm with your competitors is going to be sitting next to me on a committee or next to me in court. And so the things that you're doing to create the business that is going to be successful, and we know about the ethics of it, we know about the vetting practice, we know about the people who are outside the lines, we
yep,
hear about it enough. It's good for you to know what your competitors are doing. It's good for you to start the associations that you're leading to
yeah,
try to keep
absolutely.
everyone on track. The ethics of our business, they were always examined, right? You're always in someone's, scope. And whether it was tort reform to go after our fees in the 80s, which, we fought off fee caps in California so many times. We just made a deal around the Uber
Hmm.
proposition. The fact of the matter, the attack on the plaintiff's bar, the new de jure attack is, we're all frauds. None
Yep,
of our cases,
yep,
and law firms taking that seriously and understanding that you have to have the inputs in place. Our new tools of AI, right? We're going to get criticized about that for a while until that gets better under control. All these new things that are coming in our business, we're going to be attacked. I'm literally called a fraud in court by some nasty defense lawyer, every other week in front of a judge, and it's getting to be almost sanctionable. I'm getting very tired of being accused of committing a crime, which we have an ethics rule about this, that to accuse someone of being guilty of a crime to gain advantage in a civil case is a big no-no we all seem to have forgotten. But that's
yep.
what's happening. So dare you accuse me of fraud in any court, in any public forum, that I'm not going to fight back on you. And it's happened. It's happened in trusts where our firm is seated in committees. We know it's happened by mistake or by design, and we got to stop it. And the more we work on calling to everyone's attention to it, to be sure it doesn't happen, and to be sure your firm doesn't engage in it or get maybe lured into it by not understanding what the traps
Sure.
are, is an education process in marketing and the ethics of marketing that I don't think we have enough people like you and others in the business who are talking about it as much. And I think
Well, I appreciate that.
we need to be guided by the top ethics advisors in the country. And we have a firm. We don't do anything without consulting with our firm who manages, of all the things that happen in a law firm, and we know how combustible it can be.
Hmm.
They guide us in every decision, keeping track of the ethical rules in 20 states regarding marketing and advertising. You and I have had discussions about all this. My state's one of the hardest.
Yep.
Um,
It sure
so
is.
our advisors are, and I have the bills to show for it. We rely on them heavily
Yep,
to give us heavenly advice and
yep,
good advice. And it's something you have to take a very serious approach to these days.
yep,
uh, the mistakes that are being made, that's all we hear about. It's the front pages of the LA Times investigating the fraud involving a certain bunch of cases, a huge settlement in a county case. But
yep.
blaming me for that, I mean, I'm not going to stand for it. So we have to
And you
stand up to the
shouldn't.
bully. We
You
have to stand
absolutely
up to the
should. Yeah.
bullies, and maybe fierceness, maybe justice. I will not stand for it. And I'm they start a lot. It's creeping into every single argument in every case where somebody finds a
Yep.
problem with the case. She fraudulently filed this case because her client didn't say Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
it's a whole new way
and
of attacking us.
you were absolutely preaching to the choir on this. I sit on the board for the NLVA, the National Legal Vendors Association, and actually head up the compliance committee. And it is something I don't get paid for. I volunteer my time for this because protecting your bar card, protecting Michael's bar card, Sean's bar card, everybody's bar, like that's part of my job, understanding these rules. I'm not an attorney, but understanding the marketing side of things and how the advertisements work and all that, that's part of what we do, and it's an important job. Um, and one that I take very seriously. And so I appreciate what you said a second ago, because it is something that's near and dear to my heart. Um, so I just want to be also respectful of your time.
Well,
Do we
you want
have
to
a,
talk
and
about sexual assault,
yes, yep, want to jump
and
into sex assault and then
yeah,
finish with a little bit more about your story. So some sex abuse litigation and some survivor advocacy. A significant part of your work has involved representing survivors in sexual assault matters involving minors, including cases tied to school districts, religious organizations, and other institutions. These cases are deeply sensitive, emotionally complex, and incredibly important. Before I get into my question, you know about the foundation that we've spun up here at Email Agency and Law Logic. It's called the Phoenix Rising Foundation. It is to help victims of sexual assault, and it's because, and Amy's okay with me talking about this. Her daughter was assaulted, and Amy didn't understand what was going on. What was going on with her 14-year-old daughter, 14, 15-year-old daughter? Was this normal teenage angst? I mean, it didn't seem like it to her, right? And so when going through therapy and working through all of these things, it came out what happened. And it lit a fire that burns. I can't even give you I can't give you an analogy adequate enough for how hot that burns with Amy. And so we spun up the Phoenix Rising Foundation to help these victims heal. As you know, going through therapy for this is not inexpensive, and
lifelong for many.
yeah, the job's never done, and it's one where want to help. You can win these cases in court, but if you haven't done the work to heal, it's there's still work to do, and that's kind of the point with the Phoenix Rising Foundation. And so as we transition more into talking about sexual abuse, and that story, we've had a conversation about it. What drew you into representing survivors of sexual abuse, particularly in an institutional setting? I know why it's important to our company, but why was that? Why was that such a fight that you wanted to take on?
Well, like Amy, I had a family member who was also a victim,
Mhm.
and I figured it out. This family member didn't tell anyone, and it happened so long ago. And the rollback statutes offered an opportunity for us to get help for these people, right?
Yeah.
And when the studies started becoming known, and the Me Too movement had a lot to do with that, where
Hmm.
survivors being believed. People didn't have the courage to come forward because they were never believed, and they disbelieved themselves. So a lot of forces in our society came forward to make victims more able to
Hmm.
seek justice. But in order to do so, Sean has an advanced degree in psychology. His wife ran a huge part of the county's dependency program for children that involved sexual assault, drug, all the things that children have, challenges within the dependency juvenile courts. So I was benefited by the fact that two very important people in my life were extremely educated in this field.
Hmm.
And so understanding how to build a team to support survivors was the first business, right? We have a team of counselors. And in California, we have this certificate of merit requirement. So our clients have to talk to a licensed therapist. Knowing how to talk to survivors, knowing how to engage with them, knowing when to pull back, knowing when to push, allowing them to tell the story at their own pace. When we as lawyers are like, just get in and give me the facts. I'm going to interview you. I got a checklist. I'm using my logic and my intuition and every legal skill to decide if we have a case, and we're doing it right now on my calendar, on my time. That's the opposite of the way you handle a sexual abuse case.
Yeah.
I will say that, I mean, building that team around us, we hired a team of former district attorneys from big counties whose whole careers were dedicated to sex trafficking and sexual abuse, trying cases with them. I was long since kind of out of the trial courtroom, right? The bankruptcies took me into another kind of courtroom. And then hiring a whole team of lawyers whose strengths were in the criminal practice, and then journeying them, being with them to become civil lawyers was my my role. And so being in the courtroom, I mean, literally back on the firing line with them, being in the hand-to-hand combat of an actual jury trial in a small courtroom in Los Angeles in Superior Court, it was really fun, really, really emotionally challenging, but spiritually and legally a fun time for me to go back and to do the things I'd done again at this time of my career, and to guide other lawyers through it, and to pick juries, and to, learn that 1 out of 5 of us will be assaulted in our lifetime. Sitting and doing the voir dire of a jury of 50 human beings picked at random in a courthouse in the greater Los Angeles area from all walks of life, having them get a questionnaire that has a question on it. Have you or any of your family members or close friends been the victim of sexual assault? If you've checked yes, you were pulled back into chambers for an interview for cause. 19 of a panel of 50 people in my first sexual assault case with this new team were victims of sexual assault.
Wow.
And watching them walk out from that chambers meeting, and I let the lead lawyer, who was, I'm going to grab a book, the lead lawyer for the firm, handle those chambers conferences, because she's so experienced, and she talks to judges, being a DA, it was her case. I'm not finding my book, but watching these victims of sexual assault walk into the courtroom with a famous book called The Body Knows, I'm like, that's a person who's been sexually assaulted. They carry it with them like a Bible. And, and men and women in these panels told me that this was important work. And listening to them, that we could hear through the doors these people being interviewed screaming, saying, this school district is guilty. They should give this person all the money they need to recover their life. This happened to me. Listening to the wailing of these people, and it changed me. I had some idea, but excusing 19 people, 2 of which she didn't excuse for cause because they were older women who said, look, I did my therapy. You can't exclude everybody. And without going into a discussion of the prejudice and the rules of voir dire, you can't automatically exclude people because they've had that injury. They have to be able to serve and say, I can be fair and impartial. And people fought to be on juries and were left on it because they had done the work and been in therapy and convinced the judge. But, it's changed my life. And then the second thing about sexual assault is these defendants, and we sue a variety of them. I'll tell you, the religious organizations are far tougher to litigate against than the government institutions.
Yep. I
find it challenging, inspirational, keeps me up at night, makes me study and study areas of the law, areas of religions that I never thought I would have to understand. And the incentive for why change will not occur in these institutions that will protect children better. So when you and I have talked about this practice, we all thought when the rollback statutes stopped, it would probably winnow down, and the world is changing, and there are laws in place in government and in private companies that, child's not never left alone. There's 2 adults, the rules of scouting, the rules of trips with youth, all of that, right? There's simple rules to follow. The reporting, the mandatory reporting, all of the things that have to happen. There are huge, huge organizations that will never follow those rules, never follow them. And those have been some of the trials we have coming up and some of the things that I'm open for business. If people want to invite me to come talk about cults and religious institutions and high control religions that are abusing children and why, because of this practice that they have and all my deep knowledge of it, invite me because I
Mhm.
am here to tell you things that nobody knows. Whistleblowers are coming forward to tell us things. It's happening, but it will not stop. And high control religions like cults have a big grasp on the future of these children. And there's no incentive for them to stop.
Yeah,
So
it's wild, isn't it? I mean, these things were
it's
these institutions are
disgraceful.
they're supposed to protect the future, protect
It's
these children,
disgraceful.
and it's wild. So, kind of going into the intake side of things, and just speaking with the survivors of these traumas, they're I agree with you. It's not a all right, cool. We're gonna go through this, and it's gonna be bam, 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 bam. Okay, cool. Thanks. It's you need to know their story, and oftentimes they're reliving. Not even oftentimes they're reliving the worst thing that's probably ever happened to them. Um, how do you build trust with the survivors while also gathering the evidence necessary to move a case forward?
So it's part of the intuition of lawyering, right? You have to understand getting to know the person and not just what happened, but who they are as a person, who influences them, what their life's been like. In-person meetings, and if not in person, lots of Zooms. We're starting to use AI in a lot of ways, and I think there's a role for that. I don't. I think there's a role for AI even in essay cases, but you got to understand you have to meet these people in person where they live. You have to tell them from the first day you meet them, if your case does go to trial, you will never be alone. You will have a team. We have security for our clients. You would shock you to know how much security we have for clients and how aggressive some of these organizations are in trying to intimidate our clients. I'm not supposed to say those things and I won't put names to what I'm saying,
Hmm.
but the tactics that are used against victims of cult practices and religious practices to get them to keep them from being active in their litigation and the forces brought on them. We're so aware of it now, and we have a team of investigators. We offer security to our clients that are afraid, and people get very paranoid that they're standing up to their
Hmm.
families oftentimes that don't want them to do it because it brings up so much about what the family should have done to protect this child. It's definitely a battle that most people, if you're not in it and know what can happen to your client along the way. I have several books I tell people to read all the time. Um, how to dismantle one of these cases by exterior forces that you think you can control as a lawyer, keeping the clients supported and knowing that they can go through the journey of having to tell their story in front of a jury, what the shame is, what their guilt is, working with them on it, giving them resources, being sure they are in therapy. Look, I've changed lives along the way. There was a woman in Bakersfield who had a horrible case where a teacher lured her into a relationship, and then when she fled because her husband showed up at the family's doorstep saying with a gun saying, if you don't leave my wife alone, this is what's going to happen to you. They picked up and fled to Canada where they were legal residents. This young person just up and fled to Canada to get away from this family. And the predator followed her there.
Oh, wow.
She
Wow,
and
wow,
I
wow.
became, I mean, it was quite a story. She and I became very close because she admitted to me that she had a drug problem. It was intermittent, but that's how she coped with it. Not therapy is not available in a lot of places in the
Yep.
world, and insurance doesn't pay for it. So people resort to, alcoholism, a lot of drugs. They either super high achievers or they fall into having to self-medicate. And when she confided in me and I said, look, I said, you have got to get yourself into a program. And this was a tough, tough client. She was very tough. like prison tough, had been in jail, had been through it, right? And I
Hmm.
said, you have to get yourself on a program because this will kill you. And I didn't think there was a 1% chance she was going to take my advice. I'll be darned if she didn't enroll herself in a program not too far from where I'm sitting at this desk and became sober in a 60-day program. And
That's
called
amazing.
me and came to visit me and said, I don't know if you're going to win my case or not, but you saved my life. And that kind
That's
of thing
amazing.
happens in the least places you'd expect, in clients that know you've got to save your life. And it's not just because of a case, it's because you have value, you have worth. And this woman was somebody a lot of firms wouldn't represent. She was a tough cookie. She wore her, anger and her persona in an aggressive, unattractive to the normal jury kind of way. And she and I became quite close. And she saved her life because I said, you've
That
got to.
that's amazing. And you know what? There is no perfect person, right? And everybody needs help. And unfortunately, from what I've learned from doing this is that victims of sexual abuse, it doesn't matter how you grew up. It doesn't matter any of these things. It can happen to anyone. And unfortunately, it seems to be happening more and more and more, which is a great segue to the next question that I want to ask you before we kind of go into um, scaling volume without losing people, right? The last question on sexual abuse. What do you think the legal industry still needs to improve when it comes to handling sex abuse cases with compassion, care, and seriousness?
It's the skill of the staff. It's the people who they're going to have the touch with. It's their sensitivities to those victims, those survivors, we should call them. Um,
Hmm.
we have staff here that volunteer. We allow people to pick whether they want to do this or not, and we support them. We have some staff that have said, highly trained people that said, I can't take anymore. I'm I'm having trauma from it.
Hmm.
So we allow people to get very involved in the case, but then also to know that they have to protect themselves. And those are all challenges of any law firm, the stress of dealing with trauma, as in police work, fire work,
Hmm.
firefighters. But they have to grow relationships. And, it's a lot of women. I mean, I think you're seeing a lot of women in this field
Hmm.
because I'll just be very clear. Men do not want to talk to men about what happened to them. Our Boy
Sure.
Scout clients would talk to me or one of the members of my team and would reveal things to women they would never be able to reveal to a man. And this story always started out the same, right? They cannot tell you what happened until they trust you and feel you really care. Because the first thing any man says who's a victim of horrible, the highest level, the worst level of sexual assault will say is, so and so messed with me.
Yep.
Because they can't use the
They
words
can't
yet.
say the words. Yeah.
But a typical lawyer would say, well, explain exactly our training. Well, tell me, where did he touch you? Did the penis do this? And then they just shut down. You have to let them express to you. But the opening line is always, so and so messed with me. And a man, particularly who was assaulted as a boy between 9 and 16, is going to tell you, but they have to do it on their terms. And you have to do it in a gentle, caring, motherly, sisterly, careful kind of way. And I think that's why a lot of our staff here that are women um, are able to talk to men. That's a lot harder for a man to reveal to a man. And it's part of the reason why they never come forward. They told their
Yep.
parents and nobody believed them. They told their pastor and nobody believed them. They're called liars. They're humiliated. And I think they think maybe there's something about, the mother female dynamic that they want mother to trust them. They want sister to believe in them. They feel safe. And so I think gender plays into it because I think they feel it's just a lot harder to admit that you were sodomized in front of a man than it is to a woman who can hear and be careful with how to proceed. And it's just, it's finding your way. It's not an automobile accident. We get criticized. I think there's divisions in our bar about who should be doing this work and who shouldn't and how much of it you should do. And We're coming up on our convention in Chicago where all these groups will be meeting, and so many new people coming into the field. And I'm here to teach all of them. Like, we need more of us, and we need collaborative space within our trial bar associations, because the thing that I'm most on everyone's tail about right now is that these crimes are not prosecuted. That's the thing. When we get the file and we find that the crime was not prosecuted, my first instinct is, who put their hand in there and what happened? And if there is a statute still left on the crime, teaching lawyers, because we have a bunch of DAs on the floor below me, to march into the local police office and say, we're here to make a report, and we're making it now, and to support your client in making the report, and then to foster the process up through the DA's office. We don't get that. We got to put these people behind bars. That's the problem. Most of them aren't there. The crimes that they're being charged with, they're getting slap in the hand. The politics of like, we can all look at Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, what happened to him? Well, the first time around, what happened? Influence got him a slap on the wrist. What did he do? Live in a jail for a couple months and came and went in Palm Beach like he was, a celebrity. I mean, we have got to do a better job of, as lawyers in the civil section, forcing the criminal bar and our elected officials, our district attorneys, to prosecute these sons of guns and to hold accountable the people who stood by them and didn't reveal what they were doing or hiding the records. And what I'm famous for right now, or at least infamous, is I am bringing the trafficking claims. We're the first law firm to bring a trafficking claim in a religious setting against a religious institution. And you've got to understand the federal trafficking claim. It's a unique statute that has not been used very much, if at all, by our bar, but you're going to see it more and more. And I can take credit, and the lawyers here in leadership will be taking credit for pushing those pleadings forward in some of the cases we're working on. We
As
have
you
to get that
should.
statute. It's not just about a person who has a string of prostitutes that are all young girls imported from some foreign country and taken out to hotels or nightclubs. It's the trafficking of children by a pattern and practice of an institution that allows it and benefits from it. And when you see the case law, of how that works, it's not just a hotel. It's not just, trafficking and labor trafficking. It's us. It's schools. It had the Catholic Church been, that those cases came to light. Spotlight happened now because the bill was passed in 2008. I believe trafficking claims would have been appropriate, and they're appropriate now, and you're going to see them more. So we got to use the tools that, like I said,
Absolutely.
it's kind of like the soccer field, football field thing. We got to be creative. We have to look at the law we have, and we have to go change law. If anybody knows me, they know I spent a great deal of time in the halls of the legislature and important political offices saying, you have got to do something about this. Here's a bill. I spent a year and a half writing a bill on trafficking and presenting it to certain key sponsors in this state and others. California has the biggest incidence of sex trafficking in the world, and nobody wants to talk about it. It's way too political because we're a tourist capital, right? We have to start talking about it.
Yeah, you have a big voice. Let's get it out there, right? I think it's a very, very, it's an underserved side of what we all do, but it's gaining steam. And one of the things that I've always admired about you and Sean is your ability to take this on head on and not play in the shadows. Like, we're right here. See us? Look, right here. We're going to defend.
Well, these are one-on-one cases. Yeah. There's no warehousing sexual abuse cases. Yep. These are hand-to-hand combat cases. So all that nonsense about, the park and ride and the things we get accused of mass tort, that isn't happening in this office, and it never will. But we are on the front lines with these clients: schools, churches, government, individuals, you name it. We're doing it. So it's a great,
awesome.
It's, to be doing it this time of my career. It's like I'm a young lawyer again. Like, wow, this is unbelievable.
but it's very important work, and as you are stockpiling these and working on these one-ops and having the victories and putting all this together, it kind of leads right into scaling volume, right? Scaling a docket without losing the human being. Your career sits at the intersection of scale and humanity, right? You've
Yeah,
worked on large volume matters, but the,
good,
the, the
good
clients
way to
behind
put it.
those numbers are people dealing with injury, trauma, loss, and abuse. How do you scale litigation without allowing clients to feel like they're just part of an inventory file?
Well, the cases are filed as individuals. I mean, we do
Mhm.
have a coordinated proceeding in California for one institution, but I think we're going to see more of those. I think as the litigation grows, and now Roblox has been venued in the Northern District, and
Mhm.
we're waiting. Our judicial council petition was granted. Our JCCB petition was granted, and now we're waiting for assignment to a judge in Los Angeles. I think you're going to
Which
see.
outstanding work, by the way, on that.
Well, thank you. I wasn't, can't take all the credit, but I think we did push for it hard here.
Yeah, yeah,
And we will be doing more of it, because the common issue about all of this is that it's all growing from the same failure to protect children. They come
yeah,
to court and say, "Oh no, these cases are all too different, and every predator was different." I said, "No, the root cause is still your policy that created all this. It's the same witnesses, it's the same policies. It's, yes, like any mass tort, victims are individual and they have individual damages, but the common core is in every pleading. Read them, judge. I'll line them all out for you." So I think we're going to see more of it. I mean, we have the Uber, MDL, we have Roblox now, and I think you're going to see other people petitioning, and mostly in the cult arena, by the way, which we're planning a few that I can't talk about, but I
yeah.
can't stand it. It's just because they run us around ragged. So when you talk about scaling, how do I handle it? Right now, it's like, I'm a fire drill. Ugh, because you file 10 cases against one defendant, they have 10 law firms. You got to survive that and then figure out a way to consolidate them and refine them, which we're good at. But it's a war, and don't
Yeah.
kid yourself. A lot of people get in it and shrink from it.
Absolutely. You brought up earlier that you are expanding and growing the firm. Where do you see firms most often break down when they grow too quickly?
I think there's a competition in some layers, in some work, areas of the plaintiff's bar for having the most, right? Being the
Mhm.
biggest. Um, we we believe in being the smartest and the most resourceful and the most economical for our clients. When we present a client with a cost bill, right? Isn't that where the rubber meets the road? How much did we spend of their money prosecuting this case? And I will say, having signed a lot of accounting statements recently, that I'm very proud of the scale that we have and the economies that we're able to use to make a lot of people successful with a much smaller bottom line out of their portion. And I attribute Sean and Higgins and all the people here, all the negotiation we do with vendors. We're very careful,
Mhm.
and I think scale, we I think a lot of times our bar relies on outside vendors that get very expensive, and in a lot of cases maybe they're only needed but in smaller, ways, smaller areas. And we were very involved in the vendors that did the Purdue Trust, and we're very careful about how that money gets spent. Sean's very involved in
Mhm.
the Boy Scouts Trust, and we have a judge there that's extremely parsimonious about how to spend the client's money. And I think we need to be more aware of that. But growing too fast, how many companies have failed because they've grown too fast, right? We're seeing what record numbers of fast food chains being closed. We're seeing uh we're seeing people who can't survive the scale of which they are. So there's something about the study of the economy and the cost of these cases that if you don't really understand how to control it, which means you got to really understand your job, you really got to understand the other vendor's job, whether it's medical records or fact gathering, investigators, which we have a bunch of. You have to really project and be very careful about it. So we have a team in our it's just good business practice, right? Like we can't take on a project without doing a financial analysis of the cost on
Yep.
the from end to end, from beginning to end. And we have an excellent CFO here, highly trained. She used to work for Sotheby's and closed 5,000 escrows a year in real estate. She was very not, I think it was actually she did it a quarter. And she's learned this business and really knows how, between she and Sean, who really are dedicated to that process, it's allowed us to grow more profitably while scaling, because you still have to have the people.
Yep.
We know a lot of firms that have got a lot of cases, but they don't have a lot of people. So there's a lot of outsourcing. And like I said, AI will do things for us, but it can't do the things that the clients need to know that there's a person there that cares. You also have to meet with them in person. And that's another
Yep.
thing. We live in California. It's easy for people to get here. We fly people in all the time to sit with them, even if it's for 2 or 3 hours, to seal that relationship, to let them meet everybody, see our operation, and feel like these people are solidly behind me and investing. Or we'll travel to them. We get on planes all the time to go meet. And in these, funny enough, in sexual abuse cases, one of the things you find is, predators don't stop with 1 or 2 victims. They get large
No.
numbers. So when you find a group of victims, they're often in a geographic area. They're often in the same place where it happened. So we might meet with 4 or 5 or 6 clients on one trip. Maybe they're not all in statute, but they're certainly all witnesses. So I think that comes from the DA, the former DAs here too, how we're growing and expanding the cases. But yeah, making the mistake to open a lot of offices because you think the law is going to change. There's so much uncertainty. We saw people open offices in Arkansas. We saw people open offices in New Orleans. We saw people open offices in Maryland. A lot of that didn't go so well,
Right.
The
Yeah.
politics.
It's. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just say the politics of getting these laws enforced and then not ending up with a bad result when we open a statute, is dangerous because they're after us now. LA just floated a $230 million bond deal to pay for their past history of sexual abuse cases, their backlog.
Yep.
Can you imagine a school district
No, it's
that
wild.
it was so dilatory and so neglectful of their students that they had to go do a bond raise, and that number to manage what the problem is they created? We didn't create that, Nick. They created that. And I
Yep.
suggest to you that's going on, that those problems are going on around the country. And we got to keep Sacramento from giving them a safe harbor for it, which is what they want. That's what they want.
Yeah.
Every government
Yeah.
wants a safe harbor in these rollbacks. Well, guess what? Schools, no. Our
No.
kids
Yeah.
are, every single juror that you will interview in a school case says, when I send my kid to school, I thought that there was an assurance or an insurance policy that protected them from harm at that school when I dropped them off. And people deserve to believe that.
They should. They should be
They're
able
paying
to.
taxes for it.
Yeah. Right.
Isn't
They
that the
should. They
ultimate
should be able
leveler?
to. It's
So
crazy.
it's not going to change. That's the sad part about this interview, is that this practice is not slowing down, because sexual abuse is a crime of pathology in institutions that don't have an incentive to change. They'd rather fight us and cover it up than face into the wind and change their policies and think that we're not going to find them. And we're finding them, and they're not happy about it.
Absolutely, and I love the work that you guys are doing on this, and the work that we're doing together on this. I think it's very important work. And so, and you and Sean, but you guys have both been involved in some of those significant mass tort bankruptcy proceedings in U.S. history.
Yeah.
And your clients have served on more than 20 official tort claims committees. That gives you a
That
very
many.
unique view into where this area of law is heading. What should plaintiff firms understand before entering cases that may eventually involve bankruptcy or large scale settlement structures? I know we talked about this a little bit at the beginning,
That's
and
a great
I
question.
love the analogy between football and soccer, but can you expand upon that a little bit?
Yeah. So before we take on any case, whether it's a mass tort product case or a sexual assault case, since they're not mass tort case, but we do numbers of them. We always assess any company we're getting ready to sue. We use the financial advisors that I've learned to trust and that are geniuses. Very few people have ever met. The ones that work in the bankruptcy sphere, work in the credit sector, work in private equity. These are people who calculate risk. There are reports being done on companies all the time that we don't have access to, right? That are the secrets of what's happening. I just passed along some news to one of our friends in common that there's a danger. There's a company that just made it on a list that's when they start moving things on their balance sheet and the FAs that watch all of this traffic along with Wall Street and private equity, call me and say, listen, I think you have cases in this area. We're seeing something that causes us alarm that there may be a filing. So we start preparing, right? So we stop certain things if we think it's imminent, like an
Hmm.
announcement, right? And so there's no reason, like a lot of these lawyers think, okay, well, let's get this case to trial. There's so many rules about how verdicts don't really mean anything in bankruptcy, how payments in bankruptcy, if they aren't within a certain time frame, can be clawed back. If you settle a case, you have to really know, and every firm of any note should have financial advisors and bankruptcy advisors, people that they can call that really are playing the game at a high level. And I've got, the best because I've worked with the best. So if I'm worried about something, we're all worried about Bayer until something happened in the Supreme Court, um, stopping that. It doesn't stop it completely. There was a really well-written article by people who at the front of that litigation that, state court claims are still valid and et cetera, et cetera. Preemption isn't the only way you're going to sue these companies. But now you're going to be fighting them on a different battlefield. You really should have people looking at, and I hear it about, there's a company that sold a drug that's very involved in a big piece of litigation where we have a very large docket. And I've tried to convince the people in leadership, like, this could happen. And people just don't
Hmm.
want to hear it. It's like, well, there's a tornado watch and now there's a funnel and it's going to come down on close to ground and it's moving toward our house. They don't want to hear it. So it's negative, it's cognitive dissonance for a lot of people to hear about it. But you better know what you're doing.
Yep.
Um, because you can save a lot of money for yourself and your clients if you know that there's a bankruptcy coming and then you got to move to the soccer field. But have advisors, have people that and all these bankruptcy lawyers, though they've charged $3,000 an hour now, I've told that's the new rate, $2,800 before. They will give people like us free advice all the time. And anybody that needs to get access, has a company they're worried about, reach out. I'll be happy to help you get that assessment with our FAs. So I get the
Awesome.
data,
And
I get the announcements of alerts of who's in danger and what's happening.
absolutely, and that's actually a great segue. And for if people do need to reach out to you, what's the best way? How can they get in touch with you?
I give out my cell phone number all the time. 714-329-8242.
There it is, guys.
I
If you
have
need to
a
get in touch with
big
Ann,
network. Sorry.
I was just saying, there it is, folks. If you need to get in touch with Ann, there's her cell phone. I
I'm
have
happy to
seen,
share
yeah.
anything I can, particularly in this area of what's going to happen with this company. Even if you don't want to hear it, call me because I'll tell you what the predicted timeline is. I'll tell you what the street's saying, what Wall Street's saying, what the credit, sector saying. There are danger signs in these balance sheets all the time. How many Catholic Church bankruptcies have we had now? We're up to like a dozen.
I think so. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think,
well, they
or maybe
play
even
the
a baker's
game.
dozen.
They play that game very well because those dioceses have their little institution principalities where
Yep.
everything in that diocese is up. But you don't get to Rome and you don't get to the Boston's assets and you don't get to LA's assets or, Manhattan's assets. You only get the assets in that diocese, be it large or small. and they played the game very well. And we're still
Yeah.
fighting them. We have some big cases, obviously several out here on the West Coast, but all of those, I'm almost tired of it. Like, get it over already. We know.
Yeah.
Sell
I
stuff and
can.
pay these people.
Absolutely. Yeah, and just do the right thing. Do the right thing. So,
Uh,
and we have one segment left and just a couple of questions left, and it's really on legacy, impact, and advice for the next generation. Beyond your litigation work, you've made a major impact, as we talked about earlier, on legal education through your support of UC Irvine School of Law, your work with Dean Irwin, your advisory roles, scholarship support, moot court judging, and your honorary doctorate. That speaks to a broader commitment to the future of the profession. Why has supporting legal education been so important to you? I think I know the answer to this, but I want to hear it from you.
well, first of all, when you hear the statistics about where our members of our bar come from, they'll tell you it's in the bottom 25% of the class. We want to change that.
Sure. Flip those numbers, right?
And the only way to do it is to be involved at the ground level with telling people what this practice is. Because let's frankly, we're too busy. We don't have big PR departments like white shoe law firms to go around to all the colleges and all the law schools and do all the interviews. Well, now we're interviewing. We're invited in the interview process where you get an access to the second years along with all the other big law. I mean, that reputation has been been made that people want to come here. I've hired more graduates and trained more graduates from the University of California Irvine School of Law than any white shoe law firm. I'm the hiring hall for UCI. But I also
Awesome.
built my reputation there. If you can't go into policy work, if you can't go into pro bono work, which is what this generation's different, they want to do things that matter. Many of this generation, millennials, whatever we're calling this next group coming into law school, they have very different values than we did. And their
Mhm.
money, if you give them a questionnaire, which I always tell the placement office to do, it'll show up in the questionnaire. Just be honest. What are your goals? Making money? Do you want to own or rent a home? You'd be surprised how many of these people in their early 20s have no interest in owning real estate, right? It's just their values are so different. And what they really care about is serving in a way that changes the world,
Yeah, they
whether
want to
it's
make a difference.
sustainability, whether it's the Innocence Project is so hugely
Mhm.
successful. And Erwin Chemerinsky founded this law school with the concept that going into public service, going into pro bono work, going into policy work was very important. And he attracted those students. So that culture, I'm not saying that we didn't graduate a lot of top students that are in big law all over the world and are good friends to the school and good friends of mine, but they feel differently. And no one's there to tell them this is a place. If you can't get a job at the Innocent Project or the ACLU or any other great institutions where you would want to work to fight injustice, I'm the next best choice. And that message has carried across all of the paths in some of the major law schools here. Our reach as far as way as USD. We have several graduates from there. We have graduates from Chapman, a fine law school in Orange County. Lots of UCI, but I can't leave, let not mention, you know, Sean's alma mater. We have a lot of Trojans here, USC, UCLA. But forming a law school, it took 7 years, and California hadn't had a public law school in 40 years. UCLA was the
Wow.
last public law school. And we all know the difference between private law schools and public law schools. I mean, public law schools have access to resources, our research institutions have enormous benefits for faculty, attract the best faculty. Privates do too. I'm talking outside the Ivies. But we had an opportunity to bring a law school to my hometown, my community, that had a medical school. But Henry VIII started the university system, and it's always been believed in academics, which I thought honestly in college I was probably going to go into academics. I probably didn't have a place in the business world for all
Mhm.
the reasons we've talked about. But I love academia, and I love the fertile minds of academia, and I learned so much being involved in it. Um, so we knew that Orange County pushing it as a venue for the next law school in Orange County, which was a 7-year process, the studies, the politics. Who wants more lawyers? Not anybody. So doing that and then getting Irwin to commit to founding it attracted, the first class was a full scholarship, then the next class was, a major scholarships, and we grew it into something very important, top 20. So it was fun, and it was also, a lot of pressure, because when people can, so the whole legal community calls up Annie Andrews, invites me to lunch at some fancy place and says, we want you to commit to a scholarship, and it's not a small number. Okay, guys, well, who else is in this pot, right? Like, look around the table. Who's passing the hat? Who else is committed? And they told me, no one. But if you do it, your law firm does it, they will be shamed into doing it. So I became what you call an anchor gift, and then I made a commitment to several more gifts. And it did start the law school. I'm not saying there weren't other big donors, individual donors. There continue to be, but showing up and sort of telling big law, you're not going to pluck all the best students out of here unless you're going to put something in. So that was
That's
kind of fun.
amazing.
And that's how
I
I was
love that.
invited. I was
I,
invited because they knew I would do it. They knew my commitment to the county, and the true, Henry VIII, creating a classical university meant you had to have the three things. You had to have the College of Arts and Letters and theology. You had to have the school. So if you look at any university, it has a medical school, it has the College of Arts and Letters and Science, and then it has a law school. That's considered the perfect trinity. That's the holy trinity of education. So it rounded out and made us that prominent UC alongside UCLA, alongside Berkeley. And then meeting all those people along the way, was fun.
that's awesome. How rewarding. How
UC
rewarding.
Davis, I forgot to comment.
Yeah,
UC Davis also.
that's awesome. How rewarding though. The whole thing, I mean, it's just that is quite the legacy, which is a great like segue into the last couple of questions. When you think about your legacy, is it UCI or is it Andrews and Higgins? What do you hope younger attorneys take from your career?
Well, there's never any one thing, right? And it's not planned out or calculated. It's the things that are important to you. And, education, the advancement of women in education,
Hmm.
the thought that there's no better way to advance the cause of my gender than to say, become a professional at a top university, and I will help you. I also, my life has also been touched by tragedies like cancer, like so many of us, being involved in charities that are supporting and treating lives. A local charity I've been very involved with for years, very inspiring to me, that we got $1 million gift from pharma to provide reconstructive surgeries to women who couldn't afford reconstruction following breast cancer. And having had that experience, that was, some very important people also from UCI who fund that charity, head of science departments, came to me and said, we need you. And once they had that gift, I said, I can't say no. I will be involved. So that charity's Mission Plasticos. My work in addiction and recovery has been very important to me. I belong on several boards that are there on the front line saving lives. It also led me into a world I never thought I'd be in, which is, I'm in the board of the John AIDS Foundation, EJAF, that partners with our recovery community, because people who suffer from that disease are also most often addicted. So I've been invited into a lot of rooms because of my work, and places that I never thought I would go, because I stood up for victims of addiction and got services to the front lines of addiction to save lives. I mean, the opioid epidemic has destroyed this country in a way that there will be 2 generations before it's solved. And some people
Hmm.
will never be cured. It's what the Sacklers did, and then what all the other Me Too pharmas did. May they rot in you know where, because
Hmm.
though we emptied their bank accounts, the damage left behind has got to be solved. So being involved in mobilized recovery and some of the things that led me to the Elton John AIDS Foundation, which is a phenomenal organization, by the way. The things that Sir Elton does and the way he does it and where the money goes and raising money for them, very important work to cure that disease in his lifetime, his goal. I mean, how can you not be inspired by that?
Right. It's amazing.
You find the things that mean to you. You find the things that are important to you, and you'll find them, right? Everybody, I started as a PTO president, I raised money I was a Girl Scout leader. I mean, look, all your journey along the way with your children, with your interests. What I really try to get people to do is think about leadership in the way of fulfilling the dreams that your children want to see you dream, that you're fulfilling for people. And my family is very committed to the things that I've led them to. And it's just, these are important times. And you can give to all kinds of things, but giving at home and giving to communities and giving in places like I can see UCI Law School from my office window here. My charity that does the cancer work is down the street. Doing things in your community that how it's working, where it's going, how it's benefiting people that are important, with hundreds of plastic surgeons committing their free time to helping women survive the journey of cancer. All the organizations, the trafficking organizations, that's really kind of my next big reach, is really getting involved with some of these very important trafficking organizations that I've reached out to internationally. International trafficking and trying to stop it is a huge series of international organizations that I'm starting to connect with, because until we get these borders under control for trafficking, it's everywhere. And the girls that are being destroyed over this. So let's just say the things that have made me passionate, also my legal, my passion for these issues in the law has led me to the charities, where I have an institutional giving where I've enjoyed so much and I've learned so much. There's nothing like a woman, from my sort of humble background, walking into the big law meetings and, getting respect. I mean, I guess I'm my dad's daughter, He took me to board meetings when I was young, and I'm not afraid of them. And and I'm not afraid to speak my mind about how the course of education should be, what we can do better. And it's just been a great, my legacy is just how I live my life, how I found the things that made a difference, and growing young lawyers with great passion, and seeing so many people here who start out as clerks and say, I'm going to law school. I said, well, of course you are.
It's amazing.
Where do you want to go? How can I help you? Where do I write a letter? I mean, that's what it's all about. You have to be generous with your time, generous with your success, generous with your ability to share, and enthusiastically inspire other people to be on their journey. And that's been a lot of fun. Practice of law is a drudgery for a lot of people. It's just a job. For me, it's like I come to work every day. This is my church, This is where I get my passion, my religion.
And I don't think that you could have answered that any better. And with that, I want to say thank you for being so giving of your time, not just here, but just in general. Hearing your story, seeing the legacy that you have built and that you are passing on to the next generation, investing into that next generation, and the work that we've done together so far has been inspirational to me. And so, thank you. Thank you for being a guest today. Thank you for your time. Amy and I are definitely coming out to see you soon. The floor is yours. Is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap up?
We need more good lawyers in the plaintiff's bar. The challenges and the opportunities, corporate wrongdoing does not stop. We're living in a time of uncertainty and challenge, and we need the passion and the commitment that so few have for so many. And I welcome the opportunity to talk to more students, talk to more young lawyers, talk to more women to become forces for good in their and to be successful at it, because it's a tremendous opportunity that only in this country, And I tell every client, your right to bring this case only exists here because of the United States Constitution. If you lived in England, if you lived in Canada, if you lived in another even Western developed country, you do not have that right. You need to exercise it, and you need to believe that that's what the founding fathers wanted. For you to have a right to a jury trial is in the Constitution. So use it, and use it wisely. And we need more people standing for those victims that we represent day in and day out.
From your lips to God's ears. Thank you again for being on the Logic Exchange today. Folks, if you like what you saw, her, please like and subscribe, and put her phone number out there if you need anything. She is very, very giving with her time. And again, Anne, thank you. God bless, and have a wonderful Independence Day. Thank you,
Happy
everybody.
250th birthday.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you guys all. We'll talk
Thank
soon.
you. Bye now.
Yeah. Bye-bye.